Count Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy, usually referred to in English as Leo Tolstoy. He was a Russian writer who is regarded as one of the greatest authors of all time. He was born on September 9, 1828, and he received nominations for the Nobel Prize in Literature every year from 1902 to 1906, and for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1901, 1902, and 1909. That he never won is a major controversy. He was born to an aristocratic Russian family in 1828. Tolstoy's notable works include the novel War and Peace from 1869 and also the Anna Karenina from 1878. It is often cited as pinnacles of realist fiction. He first achieved literary acclaims in his 20s with his semi-autobiographical trilogy, Childhood, Boyhood, and Youth from 1852 to 1856, and also Sevastopol Sketches from 1855. Based upon his experience in the Crimean War, his fiction includes dozens of short stories and several novellas such as The Death of Ivan Ilyich from 1886, The Family Happiness from 1859, After the Ball, 1911, and Haji Murad from 1912. He also wrote plays and numerous philosophical essays.
For the history of the novel War and Peace, the novel chronicles the French invasion of Russia and the impact of the Napoleonic era on Tsarist society through the stories of 5 Russian aristocratic families. Portion of an earlier version titled The Year 1805 were serialized in the Russian Messenger from 1865 to 1867, before the novel was published in its entirety in 1869. So Tolstoy said The War and Peace is not a novel, even less is it a poem, and still less a historical chronicle. Large sections, especially the later chapters, are philosophical discussions rather than the narrative. The writer rewrote the novel several times. Tolstoy also said that the best Russian literature does not conform to standards and hence hesitated to call War and Peace a novel. Instead, he regarded Anna Karenina as his first true novel.
War and Peace is a literary work mixed with the chapters on history and philosophy by the Russian author Leo Tolstoy. It was first published serially and then published in its entirety in 1869. It is regarded as one of Tolstoy's finest literary achievements and remains an internationally praised classic of world literature.
The first draft of the novel was completed in 1863. In 1865, the periodical Ruski Vestnik or the Russian Messenger published the first part of this draft under the title 1805 and published more the following year. Tolstoy was dissatisfied with this version, although he allowed several parts of it to be published with a different ending in 1867. He heavily rewrote the entire novel between 1866 and 1869. Tolstoy's wife, Sofia Tolstaya, copied as many as 7 separate completed manuscripts before Tolstoy considered it ready for publication. The version that was published in Ruski Vestnik had a different ending for the version of eventually published under the title of War and Peace in 1869. Russians who had read the serialized version were eager to buy the complete novel, and it sold out almost immediately. The novel was immediately translated after publication into many other languages. It is unknown to why Tolstoy changed the name to War and Peace. He may have borrowed the title from the work of 1861 of Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, La Guerre et la Paix, or should we say War and Peace in French. The title may also be another reference to titles described as being a master of War and Peace in the 12 Caesars, written by Citinus in 119 or 119. The completed novel was then called as Vojna i Mir, or in English, War and Peace. The 1805 manuscript was re-edited and annotated in Russia in 1893 and has been since translated into English, German, French, Spanish, Dutch, Swedish, Finnish, Albanian, Korean, and Czech. Now, let's go to the characters of the story or novel War and Peace. The novel tells the story of the 5 families, the Vesukovs, the Bolkonskis, the Rostovs, the Korgins, and the Drovetskoys. So the main characters are, first is the Vesukovs family. Under the Vesukovs family, there is Count Kirill Vladimirovich Vesukov. He is the father of Pierre. And also Count Pyotr Kirillovich or Pierre Vysukov, the central character and often is a voice for Tolstoy's own belief or struggles. Under the Volkonsky's family, there is Prince Nikolai Andreevich Volkonsky. He is the father of Andrei and Maria. The eccentric prince possesses a gruff exterior and displays great insensitivity to the emotional needs of his children. The second one is Prince Andrei Nikolaevich Volkonsky. He is strong but skeptical, thoughtful, and philosophical aide-de-camp in the Napoleonic Wars, and also Princess Maria Nikolaevna Volkonsky. He is the sister of Prince Andrei. Princess Maria is a pious woman whose father attempted to give her a good education. The next one is the Rostov's family. Under the Rostov's family, there is Count Ilya Andreevich Rostov, the pater familias or the padre de familia of the Rostov family. Hopeless in finances, generous to a fault. The second one is Countess Natalia Rostova, the wife of Count Ilya Rostov. She is frustrated by her husband's mishandling of their finances, but is determined that her children succeed anyway. Next one is Countess Natalia Ilyinichna or Natasha Rostova, a central character introduced as not pretty but full of life, romantic, impulsive, and highly strong. Count Nikolai Ilyich Nikolenka Rostov, a hussar and the beloved eldest son of the Rostov family. Sofia Alexandrovna Sonia Rostova, an orphan cousin of Vera, Nikolai, Natasha, and Petya Rostov, and is in love with Nikolai. Countess Vera Ilyinika Rostova, he is the eldest. Rostov, of children, she marries the German career soldier Verge, and also Pyotr Ilyich or Petya Rostov, the youngest of the Rostov children. The next one is the Kuragins family. First, Prince Vasily Sergeyevich Kuragin, a ruthless man who is determined to marry his children into wealth at any cost. Next is Princess Elena Vasilievna Helen Kuragina, a beautiful and sexually alluring woman who has many affairs, including it is rumored with her brother Anatole. Next is Prince Anatole Vasilievich Kuragin, Helen's brother, a handsome and immoral pleasure seeker who is secretly married yet tries to elope with Natasha Rostova. Prince Ippolit Vasilievich or Hippolyte Kuragin, the younger brother of Anatole and perhaps most dim-witted of the three Kuragin children. The next one is Drubetskoy's family. Prince Boris Drubetskoy, a poor but aristocratic young man, driven by ambition even at the expense of his friends and benefactors, who marries Julie Kargina for money and is rumored to have an affair with Helen Vysukova. The next one is Princess Anna Mikhailovna Drubetskaya, the impoverished mother of Boris, whom she wishes to push up the career ladder. The other prominent characters, Fyodor Ivanovich Dulakov, a cold, almost psychopathic officer. The next one is Adolf Karlovich Verge, a young German officer who desires to be just like everyone else and marries the young Vera Rostova. The next one is Anna Pavlovna Skerer, also known as Annette. She is the hostess of the salon that is the site of much of the novel's action in Petersburg and schemes with Prince Vasily Kuragin. We also have Maria Dmitrievna Akrosimova, an older Moscow society lady, good-humored but brutally honest. Amalia Evgenievna Breen, a French woman who lives with the Bolkonskys primarily as Princess Maria's companion and later at Maria's expense. Lastly, Vasily Mitrich Denisov, Nikolai Rostov's friend and brother officer, who unsuccessfully proposes to Natasha. Platon Karatev, the archetypal good Russian peasant whom Pierre meets in the prisoner of war camp. Osip Vazdeyev, a Freemason who convinces Pierre to join his mysterious group. Bilibin, a diplomat with a reputation for cleverness and acquaintances of Prince Andrei Volkonsky. In addition, several real-life historical characters such as Napoleon and Prince Mikhail Kutuzov play a prominent part in the book. Many of Tolstoy's characters were based on real people. His grandparents and their friends were the models for many of the main characters. His great-grandparents would have been of the generation of Prince Vasily or Count Ilya Rostov. These are the 5 aristocratic families in Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. So, the gray here in this part is considered as the dead at the start of the novel. The book War and Peace considered to have 1,225 pages for the first published edition. So we have here the summary from book 1 to book 4 of the story or novel War and Peace. For the book 1, the novel begins in July 1805 in St. Petersburg at a soiree given by Anna Pavlovna Scherer, the maid of honor and confidante to the Dowager Empress Maria Fedorovna. Many of the main characters are introduced as they enter the salon. Pierre Vesikov is the illegitimate son of a wealthy count who is dying after a series of stroke. Pierre is about to become embroiled in a struggle for his inheritance. Educated abroad at his father's expense following his mother's death, Pierre is kind-hearted but socially awkward and finds it difficult to integrate into Petersburg society. It is known to everyone at the soiree that Pierre is his father's favorite of all the old count's illegitimate progeny. They respect Pierre during the soiree because his father, Count Vesikov, is a very rich man, and as Pierre is his favorite, most aristocrats think that the fortune of his father will be given to him even though he is illegitimate. Also attending the soiree is Pierre's friend, Prince Andrei Nikolaevich Volkonsky, the husband of Lise, a charming society favorite. He is disillusioned with the Petersburg society and with married life. Feeling that his wife is empty and superficial, he comes to hate her and all women, expressing patently misogynistic view to Pierre when the two are alone. Pierre does not quite know what to do with this, and is made uncomfortable witnessing the marital discord. Pierre has been sent to St. Petersburg by his father to choose a career for himself, but he is quite uncomfortable because he cannot find one and everybody keeps on asking about this. So Andrei tells Pierre that he has decided to become a dedicant to Prince Mikhail Illarionovich Kutuzov in coming war, the Battle of Austerlitz against Napoleon, in order to escape a life he cannot stand. So the plot moves to Moscow, Russia's former capital, contrasting its provincial, more Russian ways to more European society of St. Petersburg. The Rostov family is introduced. Count Ilya Andreevich Rostov and Countess Natalia Rostova are an affectionate couple but forever worried about their disordered finances. They have 4 children. 30-year-old Natasha believes herself in love with Boris Drevetsky, a young man who is about to join the army as an officer. The mother of Boris is Anna Mikhailovna Drevitskaya, who is a childhood friend of the Countess Natalia Rostova. Boris is also the godson of Count Vesikov, Pierre's father. 20-year-old Nikolai Ilyich pledges his love to Sonia, his 15-year-old cousin and orphan who have been brought up by the Rostovs. The eldest child, Vera Ilyinekna, is cold and somewhat haughty but has a good prospective marriage to a Russian-German officer, Adolf Karlovich Virch. Petya, at 9, is the youngest. Like his brother, he is impetuous and eager to join an army when of age. At Bald Hills, the Bolkonskys' country estate, Prince Andrei departs for war and leaves his terrified pregnant wife Lise with his eccentric father, Prince Nikolai Andreevich, and devotedly religious sister Maria Nikolaevna Volkonskaya, who refuses to marry the son of a wealthy aristocrat on account of her devotion to her father and suspicion that the young woman or young man would be unfaithful to her. The second part opens with description of the impending Russian-French war preparations. At the Skongrovern engagement, Nikolai Rostov, now an ensign in the Hussars, has his first taste of battle. Boris Drevetsky introduces him to Prince Andrei, whom Rostovs insult in a fit of impetuousness. He is deeply attracted by Tsar Alexander's charisma. Nikolai gambles and socializes with his officer Vasily Mitrik Denisov and also the best friend, that ruthless Fyodor Ivanovich Dolokhov, Volkonsky, Rostov, and Denisov are involved in the disastrous Battle of Austerlitz, in which Prince Andrei is badly wounded as he attempts to rescue a Russian standard. The Battle of Austerlitz is a major event in the book. As the battle is about to start, Prince Andrei thinks the approaching day will be his Toulon or his Arcola, reference to Napoleon's early victories. Later in the battle, however, Andrei falls into the enemy's hands and even meets his hero, which is Napoleon. But his previous enthusiasm has been shattered. He no longer thinks much of Napoleon. So petty did his hero with his paltry vanity and delight in victory appear, compared to the lofty righteous and kindly sky which he had seen and comprehended. Tolstoy portrays Austerlitz as an early test for Russia, one which ended badly because the soldiers fought for irrelevant things like glory or renown rather than the higher virtues which would produce, according to Tolstoy, a victory at Borodino during the 1812 invasion. Now let's proceed to Book 2. The book 2 begins with Nikolai Rostov returning on leave to Moscow accompanied by his friend Denisov, his officer from his Pavlovgrad regiment. He spends an eventful winter at home. Natasha has blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Denisov falls in love with her and proposes marriage, but is rejected. Nikolai meets Dolokhov and they grow closer as friends. Dolokhov falls in love with Sonia, Nikolai's cousin, but as she in love with Nikolai, she rejects Dolokhov's proposal. Nikolai meets Dolokhov sometime later. Resentful, Dolokhov challenges Nikolai at cards, and Nikolai loses every hand until he sinks into 43,000 ruble debt. Although his mother pleads with Nikolai to marry a wealthy heiress to rescue the family from its dire financial straits, he refuses. Instead, he promises to marry his childhood crush and orphaned cousin, the dowry-less Sonia. Pyotr Vizikov, upon finally receiving his massive inheritance, is suddenly transformed from a bumbling young man into the most eligable bachelor in Russian society. Despite knowing that it is wrong, he is convinced into marriage with Prince Kuregin's beautiful and immoral daughter Helen. Helen, who is rumored to be involved in an incestuous affair with her brother Anatole, tells Pyotr that she will never have children with him. Helen is also rumored to be having an affair with Dolokhov, who mocks Pyotr in public. So Pyotr loses his temper and challenges Dolokhov to a duel. Unexpectedly, Pyotr wants Dolokhov. Helen denies her affair, but Pyotr is convinced of her guilt and leaves her. In his moral and spiritual confusion, Pyotr joins the Freemasons. Much of Book 2 concerns his struggle with his passions and his spiritual conflicts. He abandons his former carefree behavior and enters upon a philosophical quest, particularly to Tolstoy. How should one live a moral life in an ethically imperfect world? The question continually baffles Pyotr. He attempts to liberate his serfs but ultimately achieves nothing of note. Pyotr is contrasted with Prince Andrei Volkonsky. Andrei recovers from his near-fatal wound in a military hospital and returns home, only to find his wife Liz dying in childbirth. He is stricken by his guilty conscience for not treating her better. His child Nikolai survives. Burdened with nihilistic disillusionment, Prince Andrei does not return to the army but remains on his estate, working on a project that would codify military behavior to solve problems of this organization responsible for the loss of life on the Russian side. Pyotr visits him and brings new question: where is God in this immoral world? Pyotr is interested in panentheism and the possibility of an afterlife. So Pyot's wife Helen begs him to take her back and trying to abide by the Freemason laws of forgiveness. He agrees. Helen establishes herself as an influential hostess in Petersburg society. Prince Andrei feels impelled to take his newly written military notions to St. Petersburg, naively expecting to influence either the emperor himself or those close to him. Young Natasha, also in St. Petersburg, is caught up in the excitement of her first grand ball, where she meets Prince Andrei and briefly reinvigorates him with her vivacious charm. So Andrei believes that he has found purpose in life again, and after paying the Rostov several visits, proposes marriage to Natasha. However, Andrei's father dislikes the Rostovs and opposes the marriage, insisting that the couple wait a year before marrying. Prince Andrei leaves to recuperate from his wound abroad, leaving Natasha distraught. Count Rostov takes her and Sonia to Moscow in order to raise funds for her trousseau. Natasha visits the Moscow Opera where she meets Helen and her brother Anatol. Anatol has since married a Polish woman whom he abandoned in Poland. He is very attracted to Natasha and determined to seduce her and conspires with his sister to do so. Anatol succeeds in making Natasha believe he loves her, eventually establishing plans to elope. Natasha writes to Princess Maria, Andrei's sister, breaking off her engagement. At the last moment, Sonia discovers her plans to elope and foils them. Natasha learns from Pierre of Anatol's marriage. Devastated, Natasha makes a suicide attempt and is left seriously ill. So Pierre is initially horrified by Natasha's behavior but realizes he has fallen in love with her. As the great comet of 1811 to 1812 streaks across the sky, life appears to begin anew for Pierre. So Prince Andrei coldly accepts Natasha's breaking off the engagement. So he tells Pierre that his pride will not allow him to renew his proposal. For the book 3, with the help of her family and the stirrings of religious faith, Natasha manages to persevere in Moscow through this dark period. Meanwhile, the whole Russia is affected by the coming confrontation between Napoleon's army and the Russian army. Pierre convinces himself through Gematria that Napoleon is an antichrist of the book Revelation. Old Prince Bolkonsky dies of a stroke knowing that the French marauders are coming for his estate. No organized help from any Russian army seems available to Bolkonskys, but Nikolai Rostov turns up at their estate in time to help put down the incident of peasant revolt. So he finds himself attracted to the distraught Princess Maria. So back in Moscow, the patriotic Petya joins a crowded audience of Tsar Alexander and manages to snatch a biscuit thrown from the balcony window of Cathedral of the Assumption by the Tsar. He is nearly crushed by the trunks in his effort, so under the influence of the same patriotism, his father finally allows him to enlist. Napoleon himself is the main character in this section, and the novel presents him in vivid detail, both personally and as both a thinker and would-be strategist. Also described as the well-organized force of over 400,000 troops of the French Grand Army that marches through the Russian countryside in the late summer and reaches the outskirts of the city of Smolensk. Pierre decides to leave Moscow and go to watch the Battle of Borodino from a vantage point next to the Russian artillery crew. After watching for a time, he begins to join carrying ammunition. In the midst of the turmoil, he experienced firsthand the death and destruction of war. Eugene's artillery continues to pound Russian support columns, while Marshals Ney and Davout set up a crossfire the artillery position on the Smenovaya Heights. The battles become a hideous slaughter for both armies and ends in a standoff. The Russians, however, have won a memorable victory by standing up to Napoleon's reputedly invincible army. The Russian army withdraws the next day, allowing Napoleon to march on to Moscow. Among the casualties are Anatol Kuragin and Prince Andrei. Anatol loses a leg and Andrei suffers a grenade wound in the abdomen. Both are reported dead, but their families are in such disarray that no one cannot be notified. For the book 4, the Rostovs have waited until the last minute to abandon Moscow, even after it became clear the Kutuzov had retreated past Moscow. The Moscovites are being given contradictory instructions on how to either flee or fight. Count Fyodor Rostopchin, the commander-in-chief of Moscow, is publishing posters, rousing the citizens to put their faith in religious icons, while at the same time urging them to fight with pitchforks if necessary. Before fleeing himself, he gives order to burn the city. However, Tolstoy states that the burning of an abandoned city mostly built of wood was inevitable. And while the French blames the Russians, these blame the French. The Rostovs have a difficult time deciding what to take with them, but in the end, Natasha convinces them to load their carts with the wounded and dying from the Battle of Borodino. Known to Natasha, Prince Andrei is amongst the wounded.
When Napoleon's army finally occupies an abandoned and burning Moscow, Pierre takes up an quixotic mission to assassinate Napoleon. He becomes anonymous in all the chaos, shedding his responsibilities by wearing peasant clothes and shunning his duties and lifestyle. The only people he sees are Natasha and some of her family as they depart Moscow. Natasha recognizes and smiles at him, and he in turn realizes the full scope of his love for her. So Pierre saves the life of a French officer who enters his home looking for the shelter, and they have a long, amicable conversation. So the next day, Pierre goes into the street to resume his assassination plan, and comes across two French soldiers robbing an Armenian family. When one of the soldiers tries to rip the necklace of the young Armenian woman's neck, Pierre intervenes by attacking the soldiers as taken prisoners by the French army. He believes he will be executed, but in the end is spared. He witnesses with honor an execution of other prisoners. Pierre becomes friends with the fellow prisoner Platon Karatev, a Russian peasant with a saintly demeanor. In Karatev, Pierre finally finds what he has been seeking, an honest person of integrity who is utterly without pretense. Pierre discovers meaning in life simply by interacting with him. After witnessing French soldiers sacking Moscow and shooting Russian civilians arbitrarily, Pierre is forced to march with the Grand Army during its disastrous retreat from Moscow in the harsh Russian winter. After months of tribulation, during which the fever-plagued Kharkiv is shot by the French, Pierre is finally freed by a Russian raiding party led by Dolokhov and Denisov after a small skirmish with the French that sees the young Petya Rostovs killed in action. Meanwhile, Andrei has been taken in and cared for by the Rostovs. Fleeing from Moscow to Yaroslavl, he is reunited with Natasha and his sister Maria before the end of the war. In an internal transformation, he loses the fear of death and forgives Natasha in last act before dying. Nikolai becomes worried about his family finances and leaves the army after hearing of Petya's death. There is a little hope for recovery. Given the Rostovs' ruin, he does not feel comfortable with the prospect of marrying the wealthy Maria Bolkonskis, but when they meet again, they both still feel in love for each other. As the novel draws to a close, Pierre's wife Helen dies from an overdose of abortifacient. Pierre is reunited with Natasha while the victorious Russians rebuild Moscow. Natasha speaks of Andrei's death and Pierre of Kharkiv's. Both are aware of growing bond between them and their bereavement. With the help of Princess Maria, Pierre finds love and lust and marries Natasha.